Have you ever wondered why so many marriages feel stuck like two people living under the same roof, yet worlds apart? Here's the shocking truth. 99% of couples make the same mistake that leads to deadlocked marriages. Yes, nearly all of us fall into this trap often without even realizing it. And let me ask you, are you absolutely sure you're not part of that 99%? Most people aren't. In fact, what makes this mistake so dangerous is that it doesn't look like a mistake at all. It feels normal. It feels justified. But over time, it quietly locks couples into cycles of resentment, silence, and endless arguments that never get resolved. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself replaying the same fight over money parenting or even something as small as chores? You tell yourself, we'll figure it out eventually. But the truth is, most marriages don't figure it out. They drift apart. The distance grows. And by the time people realize what's happening, they feel trapped, stuck in a deadlocked marriage with no way forward. Here's the part nobody talks about. This one mistake doesn't just cause fights. It creates a communication breakdown so deep that love and intimacy slowly fade away. And sadly, that's the #1 reason marriages end in divorce. Statistics even show that over 60% of divorces in the U.S. are caused by failed communication, not infidelity or finances like many people assume. But here's the good news. Once you can spot this hidden mistake, you can fix it. You can break free from the cycle before it's too late. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover in this video, the core mistake 99% of couples make, why it destroys relationships, and most importantly, how you can stop it from ruining your marriage. So if you've ever felt unheard in your relationship, if you've ever felt like no matter what you say, it just doesn't land, or if you've been wondering why your marriage feels more like roommates than partners, stay with me. What you'll discover today could change the way you love, communicate, and connect, not just with your spouse, but with yourself. Because marriage problems don't start with the big things. They start with small habits we ignore, tiny cracks that grow into massive walls. And once you understand how to fix those patterns, you'll unlock not only healthier communication, but also the closeness and intimacy you thought was gone for good. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. The mistake that 99% of people make in their marriages, the one that quietly turns love into a battlefield. Here it is, most couples don't actually communicate to understand each other. They communicate just to react. Think about it. When your spouse says something that stings, what's your first instinct? For most of us, it's not to pause and truly understand where they're coming from. Instead, we fire back. We defend ourselves. We prepare our counterattack before they even finish their sentence. It's almost like a courtroom where one person is the prosecutor and the other is the defendant. And that's the tragic part. Instead of listening with the intent to connect, we listen with the intent to win. We treat conversations like debates where someone has to be right and the other has to be wrong. But marriages aren't meant to be courts. They're supposed to be partnerships. When we turn them into battlegrounds, everyone loses. You might be thinking, well, sometimes I am right. Why shouldn't I defend myself? And you're not wrong for feeling that way. But here's the catch. When both people are only focused on defending, no one is truly being heard. And when no one feels heard, resentment builds up like poison in the walls of the relationship. Take money, for example. One of the biggest triggers in American marriages. One spouse might say, we're spending too much, this is reckless. And the other immediately shoots back. You're always nagging me about money. Don't you trust me? Suddenly the issue isn't about money anymore. It's about trust, about feeling controlled, about years of unspoken frustration. The real problem, Financial stress gets buried under layers of blame, and the fight repeats itself week after week. Or consider parenting. Maybe one partner says, "I think you're too strict with the kids." The other responds instantly, "Well, at least I'm not spoiling them like you do." Now the focus isn't on raising children together, it's on who's the better parent. It turns into a competition instead of cooperation. And let's not forget the everyday stuff, chores, housework, who takes out the trash, or who forgot to pick something up from the store. Little things snowball into bigger fights, not because of the issue itself, but because of the way couples communicate about them. Here's the truth. Most arguments in marriage are not about the surface issue. They're about the deeper need to feel respected, valued, and heard. When your partner complains about spending too much, maybe what they're really saying is, "I'm scared about our future. I want to feel safe with you." When they criticize your parenting, maybe what they're really saying is, "I need us to be on the same team. I can't do this alone." But here's the painful reality: because we're so busy reacting, we never get to that deeper layer. We only see the attack, not the fear behind it. And when couples stay stuck on the surface, fights repeat in an endless loop. Psychologists call this the conflict cycle. It's when unresolved arguments play on repeat like a broken record, same fight, different day. Studies show that nearly 70% of recurring conflicts in marriage never get solved. Couples just circle around them year after year until the marriage feels more like a prison than a partnership. So how do you break this cycle? It starts with shifting the goal of communication. Instead of trying to win, you aim to understand. Instead of listening to react, you listen to connect. Imagine this: your spouse says something critical. Instead of immediately defending yourself, you pause and ask, "Can you tell me more about why you feel that way?" It doesn't mean you agree. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It simply means you're curious. You want to see the world through their eyes, even if you don't like what you hear. This small shift changes everything. Because once people feel heard, their defenses drop. They stop attacking. They start opening up, and suddenly what was once a battlefield turns into a bridge. Now let me be real with you, this is hard. Listening to understand takes humility. It means swallowing your pride. It means letting go of the need to win every argument. But ask yourself this: would you rather win the fight or win back your marriage? I've seen couples who were on the brink of divorce completely turn things around simply by changing how they communicate. One husband told me, "For 15 years, I thought my wife was criticizing me every time she brought up money. Then I finally asked her why it mattered so much. She broke down crying and said she grew up in poverty, and she was terrified we'd end up the same. For the first time, I saw her fear instead of her nagging. That changed everything." Stories like that are not rare. They're proof that most so-called marriage problems aren't really problems, they're miscommunications. And once you learn to cut through the noise and listen for what's underneath, you can transform. Not just your conversations, but your entire relationship. So let me ask you, how often do you catch yourself preparing a comeback while your spouse is still talking? How often do you interrupt just to defend your side? Be honest. Because the first step to change is recognizing how often we slip into reaction mode. Here's one more thing to consider. Communication in marriage isn't just about words. It's also about tone, body language, and timing. If you're talking about a serious issue at midnight when you're both exhausted, of course it's going to blow up. If you're scrolling on your phone while your spouse is pouring out their feelings, of course they're going to feel dismissed. Sometimes it's not what we say, but how we show up that matters most. So the biggest mistake, it's not just poor communication, it's forgetting that your partner is human, with fears, wounds, and hopes just like you. When you argue only to defend yourself, you stop seeing the person you fell in love with. But when you pause, listen, and try to understand, you remember this isn't my enemy. This is my partner. And that shift from reaction to understanding can be the difference between a marriage that dies in silence and one that grows deeper with time. So how do you actually know if your marriage is slipping into that dangerous place, a place where love feels stuck, where connection feels frozen? There are certain warning signs of a deadlocked marriage that almost always show up before things completely fall apart. And the heartbreaking truth is most couples see these signs, but ignore them hoping they'll just work themselves out. Spoiler alert, they almost never do. Let's walk through these signals together. And as you listen, I want you to ask yourself, honestly, do I recognize any of these in my own relationship? One of the clearest signs of a deadlocked marriage is when communication breaks down so badly that every attempt to talk ends in either explosive arguments or total silence. Think about it. Maybe you start a simple conversation about dinner plans, but somehow it spirals into a fight about respect responsibilities or the past. Or worse, you try to share something important, but your partner shuts down completely, giving you the cold shoulder or retreating into silence that feels heavier than any shouted argument. This isn't just frustrating, it's dangerous. Because when silence replaces dialogue, connection dies. Silence might feel safer than fighting, but it's really just emotional distance growing deeper. It's like two people living on opposite sides of a wall, each waiting for the other to break through, but no one does. And when every talk ends in conflict, it trains both partners to avoid conversations altogether. Over time, the marriage becomes a place where communication breakdown isn't the exception, it's the rule. Here's another painful sign. You can be sitting right next to your spouse, yet feel completely alone. Maybe you're watching TV together, maybe you're at the dinner table, maybe you're even lying in the same bed. But it feels like there's an ocean of distance between you. This is what I call lonely together. It's the kind of loneliness that cuts deeper than being physically alone, because you're reminded every day that the person you love most is right there, but emotionally unavailable. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I don't even know who they are anymore? Or maybe they don't really know me either. That's the loneliness I'm talking about. And once this sets in, it can be harder to fix than outright conflict. Because at least with conflict, there's still energy, there's still passion. But with loneliness, it feels like the flame has gone out. Another unmistakable sign is the decline of intimacy. Not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy too. The small gestures that once bonded you, holding hands, sharing inside jokes, spontaneous affection, start to disappear. At first, you might brush it off. We're just busy with work and kids. But weeks turn into months, and you realize the laughter, the flirting, the touch, it's all gone. Instead, there's an invisible wall that separates you. You become more like roommates managing a household than two partners building a life together. And here's the sobering truth. Intimacy is often the first casualty of unresolved marriage problems. When couples stop connecting emotionally, their physical closeness almost always declines too. It's not just about sex, it's about trust, playfulness, and vulnerability. Without those, the marriage feels sterile, even if everything else looks fine from the outside. Now you might be wondering, are these really that serious? Maybe you think every marriage has ups and downs, right? And yes, that's true. But here's why these signs matter so much. Studies show that over 60% of divorces in the U.S. are caused primarily by communication breakdown, not by cheating, not by financial ruin, but by the slow erosion of understanding and connection. Couples don't just wake up one day and decide to end it. It's years of silence, years of unresolved fights, years of growing further apart until they feel like strangers. That statistic alone should make us pause, because it means the very foundation of marriage communication is what's killing most marriages. And if we don't pay attention to these early warning signs, we risk becoming part of that 60%. Here's the tricky part: many couples see these red flags, but downplay them. They tell themselves this is just a phase, or things will get better once the kids are older, once work slows down, once we go on vacation. But waiting rarely fixes anything. In fact, that the longer you ignore the cracks, the wider they grow. It's like seeing a leak in your ceiling and hoping it will seal itself. Spoiler, it won't. And by the time you face it, the damage is far worse. The good news: recognizing these warning signs doesn't mean your marriage is doomed. In fact, awareness is the first and most powerful step toward change. Because once you can name the problem, you can start to fix it. Ask yourself, do our conversations usually end in silence or fighting? Do I feel more like a roommate than a partner? When was the last time we shared a moment of true intimacy, emotional or physical? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary if you want to stop drifting and start rebuilding. And here's something hopeful: even if intimacy has faded, even if communication feels broken, even if loneliness has crept in, marriages can heal. Countless couples have come back from the edge simply by facing the truth, learning to communicate differently, and choosing to reconnect. I'll be honest, what I've learned from both research and real couples is this: marriages don't collapse overnight. They collapse quietly in the little things we dismiss. The silence at the dinner table, the avoided conversations, the distance in bed. And by the time people notice the full damage, they wonder, how did we get here? But here's what I want you to remember: recognizing the signs early gives you the power to change course. You don't have to wait until the love is gone, until divorce feels like the only option. You can take action now. So if you've been nodding your head as you listen, if some of these warning signs sound a little too familiar, don't ignore them. Don't hope they'll just vanish. They won't. But they also don't have to be the end of your marriage. Because the very fact that you're paying attention right now means you care. It means you want change. And that desire, that awareness, that's where transformation begins. In the next part of this video, we'll explore exactly how to break free from this cycle of silence, loneliness, and disconnection, and how to rebuild a marriage that doesn't just survive, but thrives. At this point, you might be wondering, if nearly everyone makes the same mistake in marriage, listening to react, instead of listening to understand, why is it so common, especially here in America? The truth is, there are some powerful cultural and social forces at play that make this mistake almost inevitable. It's not just about personal choices. It's about the environment we live in, the pressures we carry, and the beliefs we've been taught. Let's break it down. One of the biggest challenges American couples face is the relentless pressure of finances and work. From student loans to rising housing costs to medical bills, money stress is woven into daily life for many families. Add to that long work hours, career ambitions, or the constant pressure to keep up with others, and suddenly stress becomes the third partner in the marriage. And here's the thing: stress doesn't stay at the office or the bank. It comes home. It shows up in short tempers, impatient tones, and arguments over the smallest things. Couples who are already stretched thin financially often find themselves fighting not about love, but about survival. Think about how many conversations between partners begin with, "We can't afford this," or "You're working too much," or "Why do you always spend on that?" These aren't really conversations about the topic itself. They're conversations shaped by fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of falling behind, fear of the future. In fact, studies consistently show that financial stress is one of the top 3 reasons couples argue. And when combined with poor communication, it becomes a fast track to deadlocked marriages. Another major factor is the very fabric of American culture itself, individualism. From a young age, Americans are taught to value independence, self-reliance, and personal achievement. And while these traits can be empowering in careers and personal growth, they can create problems in marriage. Here's why marriage is about we, not just me. But when you grow up in a culture that constantly celebrates my goals, my dreams, my success, it can be easy to lose sight of the partnership. Instead of asking, how can we solve this together, many couples unconsciously fall into the trap of asking, how is this affecting me? Am I winning or losing? This mindset turns marriage into a scoreboard rather than a shared journey. For example, in disagreements about chores, one partner might think, I already did my part. So why aren't you doing yours, instead of how can we manage this better as a team? In parenting conflicts, one spouse might insist, this is how I want to do it, instead of what's best for us as a family. The emphasis on independence is so ingrained that compromise feels like weakness, when in reality, compromise is the very foundation of a healthy relationship. Then there's the cultural belief, almost a fairy tale, that as long as 2 people love each other, the marriage will naturally work out. You've heard it in movies, songs, and stories. All you need is love. But here's the hard truth, love is not enough. Love is the seed, but communication, patience, and emotional skills are the water and sunlight that help it grow. Without those, even the strongest love withers. Many couples walk down the aisle believing that their feelings will carry them through any challenge. But when real life hits bills, kids, health struggles, job stress, they realize that feelings alone can't resolve conflict. Without tools for communication, love gets buried under resentment and misunderstanding. And yet, because of this belief, couples often delay seeking help. They think, if we just love each other more, this will fix itself. But it doesn't. By the time they realize love isn't enough, the damage is already deep. Here's another often overlooked reason Americans grow up without real education in emotional intelligence. Think about it. School teaches us math, science, history, and how to write essays. But how many of us were ever taught how to express emotions in a healthy way? How to resolve conflict without shutting down or exploding? How to truly listen without judgment? Almost none of us. And so we enter relationships with advanced degrees in our careers, but kindergarten-level skills in emotional management. No wonder so many marriages hit a deadlock. This lack of emotional education creates a ripple effect. Without tools to regulate emotions, we let stress drive our reactions. Without tools to communicate, we misinterpret our partner's words. Without tools to empathize, we assume the worst, instead of seeking to understand. And here's the reality. Emotional intelligence isn't just a nice to have. Research shows that couples with higher emotional intelligence report greater marital satisfaction, better conflict resolution, and stronger long-term bonds. But because it's not taught, most people only learn these skills the hard way through pain trial and sometimes divorce. When you put all these factors together, financial stress, the culture of individualism, the myth of love being enough, and the lack of emotional education, it's no wonder that so many American marriages fall into the same trap. It's not because people don't care. It's not because love isn't real. It's because we're fighting against invisible currents, cultural norms, and pressures that make it harder to succeed. But here's the good news. Once you recognize these currents, you can swim differently. You can decide to approach your marriage not as a battle to win, but as a partnership to nurture. You can learn the skills you were never taught. and you can rewrite the story that culture tried to hand you. So when you look at your own marriage, ask yourself, are we letting financial stress speak louder than our love? Are we caught in the trap of me versus you instead of us together? Are we relying on the myth that love is enough while ignoring the skills we need to build? And are we willing to learn the emotional tools that can transform our communication and connection? Because here's the truth. The odds may be stacked against you, but they're not unbeatable. With awareness effort and new habits, you can break free from these cultural traps. You can choose to build a marriage that not only survives, but thrives. And in the next part of this video, we'll talk about exactly how to do that, the practical steps and strategies that can help you move from a deadlocked marriage to one filled with connection, intimacy, and resilience. So far, we've uncovered the biggest mistake couples make, the warning signs of a deadlocked marriage, and the cultural forces that push so many people into this trap. But now comes the most important part. How do you actually break free from the cycle and rebuild connection before it's too late? Because here's the good news. Marriage doesn't have to stay stuck. No matter how much distance has grown, there are practical steps you can take today to turn things around. Let's dive into them one by one. The first solution is to practice proactive communication. Most couples fall into reactive communication, and you know the pattern where one person makes a comment and the other immediately fires back without truly thinking or listening. It's like emotional ping pong back and forth until both are exhausted. Proactive communication flips that script. Instead of reacting, you pause to reflect and respond with clarity. It's about expressing your feelings without attacking and inviting your partner into your inner world rather than pushing them away. For example, instead of saying, "You never care about me," which instantly triggers defensiveness, you could say, "I feel hurt and forgotten when my needs aren't noticed." See the difference? The first statement is an accusation. The second is an invitation. It shifts the focus from blame to vulnerability. And vulnerability builds bridges. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel angry, stop and ask yourself, what emotion is underneath this anger, fear, sadness? Feeling unimportant? Then communicate that instead of lashing out. Because when your partner hears the real feeling, they're more likely to soften and connect rather than fight back. Words matter. They can either spark conflict or create connection. Small shifts in language can make a massive difference. Think about the difference between "you never listen to me" versus "I don't feel heard when we talk about this." The first shuts the door, the second opens it. Or compare, "You're always too busy for me" versus "I really miss spending time with you, and I'd love to find a way to connect more." Do you feel how different those land? One triggers guilt and defensiveness. The other communicates longing and hope. These shifts may sound small, but repeated over time, they transform the emotional climate of your marriage. Here's a solution that might surprise you. Set aside a regular marriage meeting once a week, every week. Think of it like this. We plan for our jobs, our finances, even our workouts. But most couples don't plan for their relationship. They just hope it will run itself. And that's like expecting a garden to thrive without watering it. A marriage meeting doesn't have to be formal. It can be 30 minutes over coffee on a Sunday morning. The key is consistency. During this time, you and your spouse can check in on 3 things. What's going well in our relationship? What challenges do we need to address? What's one thing we can do this week to connect more deeply? This practice keeps small frustrations from turning into big blow-ups. It gives you a safe, scheduled space to talk so problems don't pile up. And it creates accountability, because when you know you'll sit down every week, you're more likely to stay engaged and present in the relationship. Now let's address something that still carries stigma: marriage counseling. Too many couples wait until it's almost too late to seek help because they see therapy as a sign of weakness or failure. But here's the truth: counseling is not a last resort. It's an investment. Think of it that way. When your car breaks down, you take it to a mechanic. When your health declines, you see a doctor. But when your marriage struggles, society tells you to just figure it out on your own. Why marriage counseling isn't about fixing something broken. It's about upgrading the tools you already have. A skilled counselor helps you see blind spots, unlearn toxic patterns, and practice new skills in real time. And research shows that couples who seek counseling early are far more likely to stay together and report higher satisfaction. So instead of thinking, "we must be failing," if we need counseling, reframe it as we're wise enough to invest in our relationship before it's too late. Here's a mindset change that can completely transform your relationship. Stop asking, "who's right?" and start asking, "how can we win together?" Because let's be honest, winning an argument feels good for about 5 minutes, but keeping your marriage alive and thriving feels good for a lifetime. Every fight offers two choices: protect your pride or protect your partnership. Which matters more to you? A simple rule you can try is this: before responding in conflict, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say building connection or building a wall? That question alone can save countless arguments. Let me share a story. A couple I once worked with had been married for 12 years. They were on the brink of divorce, stuck in the same arguments about money and parenting. They told me they felt more like enemies than partners. Instead of throwing in the towel, they decided to try 3 small changes: reframing their language, holding a weekly marriage meeting, and attending counseling. Within 6 months, they reported fewer fights, more intimacy, and a sense of teamwork they hadn't felt since their early years of marriage. What changed? Not their love, it was always there. What changed was their approach. They stopped reacting and started responding. They stopped competing and started collaborating. They chose to invest in their marriage instead of letting it wither. And if they could turn it around, so can you. So here's the bottom line: breaking free from a deadlocked marriage isn't about dramatic gestures or overnight miracles. It's about small, consistent choices that rebuild trust, intimacy, and connection. Communicate proactively, not reactively. Reframe your words to express feelings instead of accusations. Make time every week to connect through marriage meetings. See counseling as an investment, not a failure. And above all, value your partnership more than winning any single argument. Because in the end, a strong marriage isn't built on the absence of problems. It's built on the presence of commitment, communication, and compassion. And when you choose those daily, you give your love the chance not just to survive, but to thrive. So let's bring this all together. We've uncovered that 99% of couples fall into the same destructive pattern, reacting instead of truly communicating. But here's the hopeful truth: you don't have to stay stuck. The difference between marriages that end up deadlocked and marriages that grow stronger often comes down to one simple choice: how you choose to communicate. When you shift from blame to vulnerability, from silence to openness, from reaction to understanding, everything changes. That 1% of couples who break free aren't luckier, smarter, or more perfect. They've simply decided to do things differently, to listen with the intent to connect, to speak with honesty instead of accusation, and to nurture their marriage with the same care they give to their careers, their families, and their dreams. So I'll leave you with this challenge: don't let your marriage become another number in the divorce statistics. Don't wait until the silence is unbearable or the walls are too high. Take action now, Whether it's reframing your words, starting a weekly marriage meeting, or even reaching out for counseling, small steps today can create lasting love tomorrow. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think is the hardest part of communication in marriage? Is it finding the right words, managing emotions, or simply making the time? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and your story might just help someone else. If you found this video valuable, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have more powerful lessons on marriage, family psychology, and self-growth coming your way. Don't miss them. Your relationship deserves it.